All right, hello. Ooh, it's gonna fall. Much like my hair today. I have hat head. Please forgive me. And my ear is acting up because of the weather. Please forgive me. All right, I'm gonna take those off because I don't necessarily need them. I'm sitting on a pillow here so that maybe it's not as awkward looking. Let's see. There we go. Oh. There we go. All right, so I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving and spent time with their families and loving on each other. That is the hope. And so I know some of us are feeling alone, if not alone on the holidays. And I'm going to go ahead and do a stream on something that I've been looking into. And so let's just kind of jump right into it. I hope you're all dealing with the snow well too, whatever area you live in. All right, so here we go. Now, since probably the beginning of this second channel, since at least around 2019, I have been talking about the topic of creating our own reality. And the best way that I can relate that from a pop culture standpoint is if you've seen the movie Ghostbusters 2, where, or is it 1? Ghostbusters 1. Actually, it's a theme in both movies because they end the first one with the idea of thought forms or creating your own reality. And then they actually kind of go into that with the pink goo. I never really saw that connection before, but that's interesting to note. Hi there, how are you? So, when at the end of Ghostbusters 1, when they're on the top of the skyscraper in New York City and they're all sitting there, don't think about anything, don't think about anything. I can't remember exactly how they lead into that scene. I'm going to have to pull it up and watch it for you guys and let you know how they lead into that. But they're telling each other, don't think of anything because whatever you think of, that's going to be the monster that we have to fight. You know, they're using our thoughts against us. So I've been talking about that since the beginning of 2019 when all of this kind of started. When I noticed Trump in one of his speeches, he said, this isn't going to affect you unless you have a TV, a television. And that's when I started getting into the thought of creating your own reality. Now, a lot of people, if you watch my channel, you're going to say, well, that's not a very Christian or Western Christian concept, and I will say that it is biblical. It's in the Bible. Christ tells us, ask and you shall receive. Whatever you ask for, that is what you shall get if you only believe. And so what is that? That is having a thought, a prayer, creating it through your words and your belief. So it does come up in the Bible. And in this journey, having said that, I am ready to dive into Eastern religion a little bit and spirituality. I've about had it with Western everything, and I love my country. I love my fellow man. It's the shallowness of our actual, the tapestry of our culture and how we've been able to the last few years to poke holes into everything that we've been told about recent history and ancient history. Zach Miller. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know you. Later on, man. Told Jamie I said hi. So we're going to continue. So I've been talking about this since the beginning of 2019. So what I'm going to do first is we're going to start where we usually start, and that's with the language. We're going to start with the etymology of the word Egregore or Egregore and Tulpa. So I'm going to read those to you real quick. Now, let's start with Egregore. Let's go in alphabetical order here. And it points to Enoch. We're going to kind of try and do this in a kind of chronological way insofar as we can, because time is an illusion in great part. The word Egregore comes from the French Egregore, which is derived from the ancient Greek word Egregoros, meaning wakeful. They have that in quotations. In the book of Enoch, and I didn't know this, I don't know if I read it and just like it didn't register at the time, because that's a very rich book as well. But it's in the book of Enoch. It says, and these terms also get confused. So what we have to do here is pick apart when they became kind of entangled. Think of a rope, right? You have a few different pieces of thread coming together to make one rope. That's kind of what we're looking at here, is these two these two concepts kind of came together and are kind of enmeshed now, and that's why we're looking at them together. So let's try to all of us follow along as best we can. So again, back to Egregores, its Greek origin means wakeful or vigilant. In the book of Enoch, it is mentioned as well to refer to the watchers as Egregores. I know a species of angel is also referred to as the Grigori, just for, little trivia there. The term evolved into occult traditions to mean a collective, autonomous psychic entity or thought form that is created by and influences the thoughts of a group of people. Now, again, you might think that we're talking about boogeymen here in fairy tales, but this actually has a lot to do with current events. It's actually very relevant. So I'm going to try and hopefully tie that together by the end of this video. I hope, maybe. I have tried to explain this concept. I've come at it from a few different angles, and that's what I do on this channel, because words are my wheelhouse. And so I try to come at things from a variety of different ways, because we all require different insights to kind of set off a catalyst of growth in ourselves, spiritually speaking, and humanly speaking as well. Hi, Daniel. Okay, so the Egregores refers to the angelic beings or watchers. French transition, the term was adopted into the French as egregore, meaning a collective spiritual entity. So it started in the book of Enoch as a term to describe the watchers, but then it kind of evolved into this French term. They appropriated it, and you see this happens, things go around the world, so to speak. So it went to the French after it came from the book of Enoch. Now it says modern usage today, the term is used in occult esoteric circles to describe a powerful shared thought form that can be sustained by the collective consciousness, beliefs, and rituals of a group. Stronghold, full stop. What does that mean in basic terms? Well, what this means is that, how do I explain this? You create your own reality. So there's a difference here. But let's think of the boogeyman, for example. Every culture has some type of boogeyman. Urban legends, Freddy Krueger, the Tooth Fairy, Jeff the Killer, and Slenderman. And my testimony, strangely, has a lot to do with the Slenderman backstories that you read a lot about. But anyways, these beings are given life when we talk about them, when we share stories around the campfire about them, when we pass these stories from our tribe to another tribe. We are becoming a collective that is then giving this story or this character a life of its own. We are bringing it into reality. Therefore, ergo, we are creating our own boogeymen, or boogeymen, basically. We're creating our own villains, in a nutshell, is what that would mean if you look at the collective sense. People have talked about these concepts for a long time, but for whatever reason, I think it's affecting our reality now, and our own thoughts and our own stories have been weaponized against us. This is why you'll see across the board channels share the same urban legends, the same campfire stories and tales, because they know this, and they are giving this They're using our energy and our thoughts to give these stories life. And this all goes back to Stranger Things, MK Ultra, Montauk, and in our reality, Project Paperclip. I am not gorgeous, but I appreciate that. So now we're going to move to the term tulpa and the etymology for the word tulpa. Now, the word egregore is older than the word tulpa. But again, in English, these words were transliterated at a certain point. They were older in their original sense, meaning in the Greek and in the Hindu, which we'll touch on now. Tulpa originates from, and again, we've seen this manifested, and I've talked ad nauseum about Hinduism and Tibetanism, Tibet, people from Tibet, and Eastern philosophy talking about these thought forms and giving life to your own reality. And I do believe that that's what we have here in part because we are co-creators. The reason we're seeing things fall apart now is because we're no longer all in agreement with a shared reality. We have all been exposed to the internet and each other's beliefs. So we're reading that, we're taking that information in, and we no longer all have a shared set of values or morals, meaning we don't have a shared foundation for a strong foundation for a shared reality. So here we go. Now, the word tulpa originates from Tibetan, where spurl pa means emanation or manifestation. And again, this is why a lot of us Western Christians, we are brought up, don't do that, that's bad. And they know we want to be good. Like most people have the desire to be good. You don't want to hear that you're bad or you've done something naughty, most times. And so they tell us certain things are bad, again, just to keep us in ignorance. And God's children perish for a lack of knowledge. So the term tulpa was introduced to the West by European explorer Alexandra David Neal in her 1929 book, Magic and Mystery in Tibet. In its modern Western context, the term often refers to a thought form. Now you'll see a lot of your modern ARGs, your horror stories on YouTube, which are really cool, really creative. A lot of them talk about thought forms being created. And you remember, to point back to our childhood, we're taught things like sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Why do you think we're taught sing-song rhymes like that? And our own parents have taught them to us. Because they don't let you in on the secret that you're creating your own reality until you've proven that you have good thoughts in there, right? We all have to clean out or cleanse or baptize our minds. And we've got a lot of junk floating around in there. This is why Christ told us, keep your mind on heavenly things. What? Keep your minds elevated. Keep them on blissful, happy, joy-filled, good, wholesome things. Because you are helping to create what is happening here, and your environment. So it says, in Tulpa, the Tibetan origin, the word is a transliteration of the Tibetan spurl pa. In its original context, it signifies emanation or magical creation. It also is related to the Sanskrit word nirmita. If I mispronounce these words, I apologize. And again, on this channel, we are not afraid of words. We are not afraid of reading. We are not afraid of exploring new concepts because we are spiritually mature enough here to understand that we have more responsibility, those of us who have powerful minds. And I'm going to talk about the power of isolation on a mind in just a moment when I finish reading this etymology here. So it says that originally it came from Sanskrit, meaning magical creation. Western adaptation, the concept was adopted by Western mystics, particularly the Theosophists, who popularized the idea of thought forms or imaginary friends. That is consciously willed into existence. And now they will tell you things like this are evil. They don't want you, see people left, they don't want you to know this. Not because they care about you, but because they are weaponizing our own thoughts against us, much like they weaponize other younger generations against older generations. They weaponize us against ourselves. Why? What does the book tell us? Because a kingdom divided against itself will fall. This is why they are using our own thoughts and weaponizing them against us. They want us dwelling on biblical. I couldn't figure out why the media suddenly is putting out biblical concepts. They're putting it out there because they want you focused on persecution. They want you to consent to persecution, and they will replay this cycle as many times as we remain in ignorance and don't call them on it. I could not figure out why mainstream media was putting biblical concepts out there, but it's only the bad things that happen. It's all very shallow, and it's a very physical, literal understanding. It's not spiritual at all. And this is why people like Megan What's-Her-Face on Fox News. This is why she said what she said, but nobody else has referenced it since. Subliminal messages. You say something really quickly, you slip it in, and you never say it again. It works the same way, oddly enough, as repetition does on a mind, and it can train the mind. It'll work on your mind, on your subconscious, and that's where it's dangerous, because as you're going about your day, going into these menial tasks that so many of us are given to keep us busy, busy work, the back of your mind is doing things, and they are using that against us, in a nutshell, basically. So modern usage, Tulpa is often used in online subcultures to describe a sentient being that is created by the mind through intense concentration and visualization, again, like Slenderman. Okay, now we're gonna switch gears. Because I talked about Slenderman, we're gonna look at him, but that's not the only thing we're gonna talk about. So just hang in there with me. Slenderman, you could insert any boogeyman name into there. You could call it the boogeyman. You could call it whatever that thing is in Lights Out and Darkness, Jeff the Killer. You could put any other name in. You could put Satan in there, the devil. He always comes in a suit. That's what we were taught when I was younger. Okay, so this comes, and I will try to remember to include these links in the description box. I'm not always great about that. I apologize. Give me a second. Okay, and we are getting a lot of snow here. It's lovely. The two Slendermans. Now, again, this isn't the only thing we're going to talk about. You could insert any boogeyman name there. Now, it says, many might recall that this past summer, now this is from 2014, and I try to find sources that are a little older. There was a bit of moral panic over the internet meme, the Slender Man. The panic began in Wisconsin. I'm not going to repeat what they did, and we know that that's also coming back around. Now, again, what you'll find interesting when we talk about egregores and the concept of bringing your own egregore to life, you could also think of this in the Jewish theology, or in the Lord of the Rings. They are the orcs, right? They bring the orcs to life. They are kind of NPC-ish, right? Background players. They're just there as filler, right? Now, again, I don't believe in doing harm. I'm a pacifist. I am not promoting violence in any way. I'm just telling you that we have things here we're dealing with that we have brought upon ourselves quite literally. I mean that in every aspect. And so I'm trying to get people to be consciously aware of this, to bring this to the surface, so we can all work on what we create, and let's create a good shared reality, and ignore the media, because for whatever reason they want us to destroy ourselves. So the agenda is anti-human and anti-soul. It's anti everything that we are made of, and so we should resist that, but you don't want to resist it too powerfully, because then again you'll have the boomerang effect. We have to navigate these waters very carefully. Okay, so I'm not going to repeat what happened, but Slenderman is a creepypasta story and a modern urban legend that started online, and it corrupted the youth of America. Some parents said the story has new life now that a Florida teen. So it started in the north, in Ohio, ironically enough. The mother was from Ohio, or they lived in Ohio. And then again, it happened in Florida, where people were basically worshiping this Slender Man thing. So we're going to go here. Studying the Slender Man, his origins, and his growth since the first iterations in 2009 on the web since something awful have been unnerved by this panic. The original story was not much more than creepy, certainly not violent storytelling. It resembled more a fairy tale than that of an Eli Roth film. The original stories primarily had the Slender Man targeting children, though this quickly shifted to young adults, the most common online storytellers. And they do that for a reason. That's why you saw a lot of the YouTubers get initiated a few years ago, because they have the mind of the youth, the collective mind of the youth in their grasp, these influencers. That is the most powerful place to be right now. And it's very intoxicating and tempting to a lot of people. So, for those who are unaware of the basic premise, the Slender Man is a non-human presence who stalks victims. He is faceless, thin, and grotesquely tall. Depending on versions of the story, he may have tentacular arms, tentacles, if he's in Florida, is bald, and almost always wears a suit. The devil came in a suit when I was a kid, and our parents told us stories. The devil always came in a suit, and you were to never trust somebody in a suit because they were trying to sell you something, and usually it was something you didn't need, you didn't want, or you shouldn't have because it wasn't good for you. Okay? He is faceless, bald, almost always wears a suit. He is often hidden or disguised by trees. He may be able to teleport, and may cause physical illness and or insanity in those he is around. Now, if you take the Slender Man name out of there, he has a lot in common with alien abductions. Those people get sick. Those people have sleep paralysis. A lot of these things begin in sleep, and this is what I find amazing. It begins in nightmares, but not nightmares about these things. These things are already being given a life, right? Oftentimes you'll have sleep disturbances that don't relate anything to these beings. You don't relate it to these beings. It will present itself in whatever you are most afraid of. If you're most afraid of aliens, that's what they want to sell you. If you're most afraid of Bigfoot, that's what they want to sell you. If you're most afraid of fallen angels, that's what they want to sell you. If you're most afraid of Slender Man, that's what they want to sell you. Now, are these beings actually real and sentient? Well, we'll get into that a little bit. He may be able to teleport. He is the textbook definition of the uncanny. He really is. His similarities to human form, yet otherworldly features and appendages make him almost human, but not quite. His blank face makes him both familiar and mutable. If the stories teach us nothing else, they teach us there is nothing more horrifying than an anonymous white male with ominous intentions wearing a business suit. This is not to say that all Slenderman stories stayed away from explicit violence. Many early versions were more creepy than violent. Some did take a violent turn. Okay. Now, I just want to see. Okay, here we go. Now, here is where the Tulpa effect comes into the Slender Man story. Of the many debates about the origins of the Slender Man in online forums, my favorite theory is the Tulpa effect. Now, I can't believe that I've talked about this and I've used like hours of my time to just try to describe this concept that I didn't have a word for, and nobody ever said, hey, it's called the Tulpa effect. I happened to see that in my feed. The same video kept popping up, and finally I'm like, all right, I'll look it up. I'll search what that term means. And here it is. It's exactly what I've been talking about from Ghostbusters when they created the giant Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. That's what they're having us do in this time. They're weaponizing the media. They are giving us these scenarios in the media, and then you're believing them, and they are coming into reality. I think a lot newscasters, right? What do? They forecast. They tell you about something before it happens. Why? Because if they tell you about it before it happens, they're using the audience's collective consciousness or the collective imagination against itself. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. Sorry, I mute bots. I don't deal with bots. Okay, so of the many debates about the origins of the Slender Man in online forums, my favorite theory is the Tulpa effect. Oh, hold please. Let me just, we are in, it's called Culture Digitally, and it's called The Two Slender Mans by Shira Chess, September 10th, 2014. I'll include the link as well. Okay, there we go. The Tulpa effect. The Tulpa is an esoteric concept, a magically created thought form appropriated from Tibetan traditions by turn-of-the-century Western author Alexandra David Neal. The basic premise is that a person can breathe life into an imaginary thought form. Now, and again, a lot of us copy our parents, right? So what are we doing here when we create a golem, right? Like Lord of the Rings, or a thought form, or a egregore? We are copying the one who made us. We copy our parents, we're copying the creator. We breathe life just like we had life breathed into us. We started as clay or dust of the earth, and we have life breathed into us. We give these boogeymen lives, and to our detriment. So a tulpa is an esoteric concept, a magically created thought form appropriated from Tibetan traditions by turn-of-the-century Western author Alexandra David Neal. Now, we get into her a little bit more after this because she had some strange goings-ons, and she allegedly claimed to have created a thought form, and we'll check that out in just a second. So the basic premise is that a person can breathe life into an imaginary thought form, giving it a will of its own through the right ritual practices. It is like an imaginary friend brought to life. The tulpa, once created, is no longer controlled by its architect and often invites havoc. In some interpretations of tulpas, it can be created simply from a large enough group of people believing it into existence. Just like the placebo effect, or when you make yourself sick because you hear about nothing but illness for several years by the media. The Tulpa theory of the Slender Man suggests that the Slender Man himself has been willed into existence simply because enough people believe in him. And this is going to sound crazy, but I would agree with that. I've been trying to explain this for years on my channel. The Tulpa effect theory works neatly with the existing mythos of the Slender Man. It allows for readers to acknowledge that the character was fictionally constructed, yet leaves the possibility for the fact that, even with fictional origins, he still might exist in the real world. It's a clever way to make the character both fictional and non-fictional all at once. And the memory loss with the Slender Man stories, that is very interesting to me because that also has a lot in common with the alien abduction stories and lost time and lost memories. Yet, if the Slender Man has become a tulpa and has been willed into existence by the internet, then it is entirely possible that those creating moral panic of the Slender Man have created a secondary tulpa. While the original tulpa is a fictional character based on the amalgam of existing fictions and works of art, co-created by storytellers and their audiences, the second tulpa is the one that haunts parents, journalists, and pundits. The second Slender Man tulpa promises that if your child engages in creative work online, they will somehow be sucked into a world where they cannot tell fiction from reality. But I would argue that our fiction would appear to create reality, and I've talked about that a lot here. Okay, so we're going to talk a little more about some of these matters. Let me pull up a couple of things for you. And there we go. Now, this is a little more about Alexandra. This person brought this idea or this concept into Western philosophy, if you will, or was one of the first. Where tulpas come from. This is from JSTOR Daily, the nonprofit library for the intellectually curious. Where tulpas come from, created through the power of the human mind, tulpas bear little resemblance to anything found in the Tibetan traditions in which they allegedly originated. So let's check this out. If you read or watch a story featuring a Tulpa, a paranormal entity created by the thoughts of an individual or a collective, and there are a lot of movies like this. Again, with my mom owning video stores and being a movie addict, basically, I've seen so many horror movies. And again, that makes me immune to a lot of stuff out there that they're trying to make people afraid of. They tell Christians, oh, don't watch scary movies. They make you kind of immune to it. After a while, you're not afraid of these symbols and words and, books or what have you. So let's continue. If you read or watch a story featuring a Tulpa, a paranormal entity created by the thoughts of an individual or a collective, you'll probably find a mention of its origins in Tibet. But its scholars of religion, Natasha L. Mickles and Joseph Laycock, write, the reality is more complicated. And again, these two things, the Tulpa and the Egregore, they seem to have become enmeshed with each other and intertwined. Now it says, they write that the Tulpas became part of modern paranormal lore after journalist and UFO enthusiast John Keel mentioned them in his 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies. So do you see how a lot of these urban legends, a lot of these characters, even Freddy Krueger, it's mentioned in that book. Nancy says, I'm taking all of the energy back that I gave you to help create you and make you so scary to her, right? And even the mother and all of them, they're like, he's dead, he's dead, he's dead. But they had made his energy so palpable because they had kept thinking about him and they were so scared for their children. Does it remind you of anything? So continuing on, he wrote that novelist Walter Gibson's house had been haunted by a figure resembling Gibson's character, the Shadow. Now this is the author of the Mothman Prophecies, explaining that, quote, the Tibetans believe that advanced human minds can manipulate these invisible energies into visible forms called tulpas or thought projections, end quote. Now, I did another video on this, and again, this is why we look for the common thread across faith systems, cultures, religions, and with science as well, scientific discovery. We talked about this. Oh, shoot, now I forgot. When you have to over-explain yourself, you tend to forget things. We talked about this in regards to not just the Mothman prophecies, but also there's an old Jewish story about there being, at any given time, 28 people across the realm, the earth realm, that control or create reality. They're the co-creators, and that these people have to be isolated and kept away from society so that their minds stay on happy, joyful, simple, natural things, because if their minds become polluted, then reality will become polluted. So again, this is a concept that you see the common thread through a lot of different faith systems. And I'm trying to help people find their common ground in these times, because there's a lot of division and it is quite literally pulling apart our reality, I believe. And that's what I work towards proving on this channel as well. So here, let's continue. Eventually, the idea was picked up in pop culture with an episode of Supernatural. For example,